This channel and video is sponsored by Ratchet Clothing. Go check out Ratchet's many styles. I'll put their link in the description down below. Today I'm going to talk about a story that involved a gambling spot, a woman that could have turned into a disaster. My friend and co-defendant Michael Liguori used to stay in a bar in Flushing, Queens called Zachary Taylor's. And prior to this incident, I've only been in the bar a few times. But one day Michael asked me to meet him there, and I did. He was at the bar drinking with a bunch of guys when I got there, and after saying hello, he asked me to go take a walk outside with him. He said he wanted to show me something, and it was a storefront a few doors down. I asked him what the place was, and he said it was a gambling spot and it was run by a nobody, and he wanted to shake the place down. When he first said this, I was skeptical because typically gambling spots are not operated by nobodies. But Michael insisted that the guy wasn't around anyone. He told me that the guy goes into the bar every once in a while for a drink, and Michael called him a herb, which means basically he's a potential victim or a chump. Anyway, he convinces me to at least meet with this guy so that we could talk to him. Michael was an aggressive guy, but to the point of leaving little room for thinking things out. I told him to get a message to the guy and tell him that we wanted to speak with him. So a day or two later, Michael tells me he's got the guy Herbie coming to Zachary Taylor's that same night. Later that night, I showed up before the meeting time to watch the area surrounding the bar. About 5 minutes before the meeting time, I seen a woman with red hair smoking a cigarette walking towards Zachary Taylor's, and she wound up going in the bar. But I didn't associate her to anything we had going on. Then I took notice to a van that kept circling the block. Around its fourth pass, it wound up parking on the corner of a side street. I watched it for a few minutes, but nobody got out, and I decided to go in and give Michael a heads up. When I walked in the bar, one of Michael's friends told me that he was in the bathroom. There were only a couple of people sitting at the bar, and the woman with the red hair being one of them. The next thing I know, she approached me and asked, "Are you John and Michael?" I laughed and said, "I'm just John," and I shook her hand. She said she wanted to go talk in the back, and I was confused as to who she was and what she wanted. I followed her to the back of the bar, which was empty, and she handed me a business card. It was a Manhattan business that rented out machines like cigarette machines, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, etc. Then she said that her nephew, and as she put it, ran the spot next door. She didn't say gambling spot, which displayed her street smarts. She said that her nephew was handling the place for her incarcerated husband. So at this point, my antennas are up. Then she took out a picture and handed it to me. In it was two guys wearing khakis. Obviously, one was her husband, which I didn't recognize. But the other one brought a smile to my face, Bruno and Delicato. Seeing my smile, she says, "Oh, you know Bruno. He's a great guy." I didn't answer, but I kept the smile on my face, which in itself is an answer. Then she attempted to ask me why I wanted to see her nephew. I told her, with all due respect, I can't discuss that with you, but I do want to thank you for taking the time out to come here and talk to me. She looked at me and smiled, and she said, "Can I ask how old you are, John?" I told her I was 20 years old. She said, "You're very wise for a 20-year-old, John." But what she said next had my head spinning. She says, "I was sent here to see if you would discuss this with me, and had you, I was told I was to excuse myself and leave." She said, "Friends of my husband are waiting outside in a van, and if I was to walk out of here and light a cigarette, that was the signal for them to come in here. But I'm glad that isn't the case." Then she put her hand out and said, "It was a pleasure to meet you, John," and started to walk away. But she turned around and winked at me and said, "I'm dying for a cigarette, but I'll save it for the car ride home." I stood there and watched her leave, and then I walked over to the bar, and Michael was sitting there talking to a couple of guys. He said, "Bo, who is that?" I didn't want to explain it in front of everybody, so I told him, "Come in the back. I want to talk to you." I explained everything that took place to Michael, and then I told him, "Thank God that she tried to talk to me, because you would have talked to her." But he insisted that he never would have talked to her. I told him he's full of shit. But he was adamant that he wouldn't have said a word. Still to this day, that's debatable. I tried to go on Google Maps and get a street picture of the block that the bar was on. Unfortunately, they ripped all the storefronts down and built a large housing complex. At the time of this incident, Michael and I were out on bail on a homicide case, and we were also only associates. I suggested to Michael that we leave the gambling spot and the woman's nephew alone, and he agreed with me. I never did find out who the woman's husband was, but if I had to take a guess now, I would say he was with the West Side. This was an example, and in contrast to present day, how fast the mob was to resort to violence. I'd say this was late 1989, early 1990. Michael and I would be convicted and sentenced that same year. Those were, without question, dangerous times in the street. You had to be extremely cautious at what you were doing. Had Michael or myself spoken to that woman, who knows what would have happened. We both had pistols on us, and we definitely would have reacted if we had time enough. It's also very likely that one or both of us could have got killed that night. When we first got out on bail, the lawyers told us, don't carry any guns and keep out of trouble. But we didn't listen to any of their advice. When I think back to some of the things we did and some of the things we were involved in, we were fortunate enough to have people that would step in if need be. You know, at that age, you think you know everything and you think you have all the answers, but that was the furthest thing from the truth. But that's how you learn the ways of the street and how that life operates. Every time we were in a situation where somebody did have to step in for us, I paid close attention to how it was resolved. For example, if you did something wrong or not according to protocol, you would get reprimanded, but you also knew not to let it happen again. I would tell friends of mine, no, you can't do that, or you can't do it this way. And they thought I was so wise. Meanwhile, I only learned from all my mistakes. So as young associates, we watched and learned. While I'm on this topic, I did a video one time about a conversation I had with Butch Arpino, who was a Lucchese associate at the time. I'll put a link for that video down below in the description. Basically, Butch had knowledge of his upcoming induction, thanks to Patty Della Rosa, and he wanted to ask me a question. If you watch the video, keep in mind, at the time, Butch was in his mid-50s, which means he never was in the street dealing with situations. Yet, he was on a list for members being proposed. So imagine today, this guy going to a sit-down with a seasoned wise guy. He'll get eaten alive. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please remember to hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, you could do that as well. Also, if you think friends and family might enjoy this video, please share it, and thank you. Okay, till the next time. You can subscribe to the Sit Down News blog at sitdownnews.com, and I appreciate everyone who has subscribed. Thank you. Well, just another example in the mob you never knew about. If you would like to subscribe to this channel, you can do so down below. If you would like to subscribe to my other channel, Unlimited Substance Podcast, I'll add a link in the description to this video.